crystal chandeliers blazed with 1,000 candles in the grand hall of Iron Peak Castle. Dahlia Houston moved like a ghost through the glittering crowd, her simple cream dress a stark contrast to the noble's jewels and silk. She clutched the moonflower she'd picked for Derek, its petals already wilting in her nervous hands. The autumn equinox ball brought out celebration in everyone. The harvest was good, the winter preparations complete, and the pack gathered to honor the turning of seasons. Tonight, judging by the champagne flowing freely and the orchestra playing something bright and triumphant, the mood was especially jubilant. She smoothed down the front of her dress, the only fine thing she owned, and tried to calm the wild beating of her heart. Tonight was the night Derek had promised. After 6 months of secret meetings in the healing gardens, stolen kisses in shadowed corridors, whispered promises that rank didn't matter, when hearts were true, he would finally acknowledge their bond, publicly, before everyone. "More champagne, Omega," Lady Ashford called out, snapping her fingers without even looking at Dahlia. Dahlia hurried over with the bottle, keeping her green eyes downcast as she poured. The amber liquid caught the candlelight, bubbling and golden in the crystal flute. She had nearly finished when Lady Ashford's companion reached out and flicked the moonflower in Dahlia's hand. "What's that pathetic thing?" the woman sneered, though Dahlia hadn't spilled a single drop. "Planning to present weeds to someone important? How touching." Dahlia bit the inside of her cheek and said nothing. Words were weapons in the hands of nobles. Silence was the only shield she possessed. She retreated toward the edge of the hall, weaving through the crowd of magnificently dressed shifters. The men wore tailored suits in deep jewel tones, their cufflinks gleaming with pack symbols that marked their ranks and territories. The women glittered in gowns of silk and satin, their hair elaborately styled and adorned with precious gems. Dahlia's own dress, simple cream cotton with lace she'd added herself, felt suddenly shabby by comparison. The moonflower trembled in her grip. "Dahlia." The voice stopped her cold. She turned slowly, heart already beginning to race. Derek Gutierrez stood at the edge of the raised platform where the high table sat. He was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often are. Sandy brown hair swept back from his forehead, hazel eyes that held a gleam she had always interpreted as warmth, a smile that had once made her believe she mattered. In 6 months of secret courtship, garden meetings under starlight, gentle touches when no one was watching, she had convinced herself that smile meant love. "Come here," he said, gesturing for her to approach the platform. Dahlia's wolf stirred uneasily beneath her skin. The creature was small and quiet, as befitting an Omega of her station, but it possessed instincts that are human, mine sometimes ignored. Right now, those instincts whispered warning. She climbed the 3 steps to the platform. Derek's older brother, Angelo, sat in the ornate chair at the center of the high table, the Alpha King's seat, watching with dark, unreadable eyes. His presence was overwhelming, even in stillness. Battle-scarred, bearded, crowned, wrapped in furs and black armor that spoke of countless victories. Where Derek was bright and charming, Angelo was shadow and steel. Other important pack members flanked him, all of them turning to stare at Dahlia with varying degrees of curiosity and disdain. "My lord." Dahlia kept her voice soft, uncertain, clutching the moonflower tighter. Derek smiled. It was the same smile he had given her a week ago when he had found her in the healing gardens and kissed her until her knees went weak. The same smile he had worn when he whispered that she was special. That rank didn't matter. that he saw her in ways others never would. "I have an announcement to make," Derek said, his voice carrying across the hall. Conversations began to die away as people turned to look. "One that concerns this woman." Dahlia's pulse thundered in her ears. This was it. He was going to declare their bond. It seemed impossible. He was the Alpha King's brother, second in command of the most powerful pack in the realm. She was nobody, an Omega healer who tended the castle gardens and sick room, with no family connections and no particular skills beyond what her mother had taught her before she died. But Derek had sworn he didn't care about such things. He had held her face between his palms and told her she was beautiful. He had traced the soft curve of her cheek and called her his moonflower. "This woman," Derek continued, gesturing to Dahlia with an almost theatrical wave, "has been a source of great amusement to me these past months, a delightful distraction during tedious evenings." The words took a moment to penetrate. When they did, Dahlia felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "You see," Derek went on, his voice taking on an edge she had never heard directed at her before, "I needed to pass the time while negotiations were finalized with Lord Blackthorn regarding his daughter. And what better way than to see how far a desperate little Omega would debase herself for a scrap of attention?" Laughter erupted from the crowd. Not polite chuckles, but genuine, cruel mirth that crashed over Dahlia like a wave. She stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. The moonflower slipped from her fingers, petals scattering across the polished wood. Derek turned toward the archway that led to the private chambers. "My lady, if you would join us?" A woman glided into the hall, and Dahlia's heart cracked down the middle. She was everything Dahlia was not. Tall and elegant, with raven black hair elaborately braided with silver thread and white roses. Her gown was deep crimson silk that whispered against the floor as she walked, cut to emphasize a figure that needed no emphasis. Diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists, catching the candlelight like captured stars. "May I present Lady Vivian Blackthorn," Derek announced, taking the woman's hand and raising it to his lips with reverent devotion Dahlia had never seen him show. "My betrothed." The hall exploded with cheers and applause. Nobles surged forward to offer congratulations, to admire Lady Vivian's ring, to toast the advantageous match. Through it all, Dahlia stood motionless on the platform, a statue carved from humiliation. Derek turned back to her, and whatever warmth had once lived in his eyes, real or imagined, had been replaced by something cold and amused. "Surely you didn't think I would actually consider bonding with someone like you. You have no family, no rank, no dowry. You're not even pretty by any standard that matters. What could you possibly offer someone of my station?" Each word was a blade, precisely aimed and deeply cutting. Dahlia wanted to speak, to defend herself, to scream that he had been the one who pursued her, who sought her out in the gardens, who made her believe in impossible things. But her throat had closed around the words, refusing to release them. Lady Vivian approached, her lovely face arranged in an expression of exaggerated pity. She bent down and picked up one of the moonflower's scattered petals, examining it with mock interest. "Oh, you poor, deluded creature," Vivian said, her voice dripping false sympathy. "Did you actually believe his pretty lies?" She dropped the petal and ground it beneath the heel of her silk slipper, twisting, until it was nothing but a smear of white against dark wood. How pathetic, how absolutely pathetic. The crowd's laughter reached a crescendo. Dahlia heard whispers rippling through the hall. Always knew she was delusional. Grasping above her station, Dianxing de Omega delusion. Did you see her face when he announced? Priceless. That dress. Did she make it herself? How embarrassing. Dahlia's vision began to tunnel. She needed to leave, needed to run, but her feet refused to move. Her entire world was collapsing, crumbling like the moonflower petals beneath Vivian's heel, and she couldn't do anything but stand there and let it happen. Vivian picked up a champagne flute from the table and examined it thoughtfully. Then with deliberate, theatrical slowness, she poured the entire contents over Dahlia's head. The cold liquid soaked through her carefully arranged hair and down her face, mixing with tears she hadn't realized were falling. It stained her cream dress a darker shade, spreading like blood across fabric she'd spent weeks sewing and mending to make presentable for this night. Oops, Vivian said sweetly, setting down the empty flute. How clumsy of me. But then, you're used to being treated like the servant you are, aren't you? The laughter became deafening. Dahlia's gaze swept desperately across the high table, landing on Alpha King Angelo. He sat in his ornate chair, one scarred hand curled around his own champagne flute, watching the scene unfold with that same unreadable expression he always wore. Dark eyes hooded, bearded jaw set, posture suggesting both absolute power and complete disinterest. When their eyes met for just a moment, something flickered across his face. Not sympathy, not intervention, just assessment, as if he were cataloging her destruction for future reference. Then he looked away, taking a slow drink from his flute. He would not stop this, would not intervene, would not protect one of his own pack members from public humiliation because she didn't matter. None of them mattered unless they were useful. Derek's engagement to Vivian brought wealth and military alliances. What was one lowly Omega's dignity compared to such advantages? Something broke inside Dahlia then. Not her spirit. She would discover later that her spirit was stronger than anyone suspected, even herself. But the fragile hope she had clung to, the childish belief that someday, somehow, someone would see her as worthy of basic kindness, that shattered completely. She turned and walked down the steps of the platform. The crowd parted for her, still laughing, still jeering. Someone threw a piece of bread that struck her shoulder. Another voice called out something crude about what she might do to find a mate, now that she'd been so thoroughly used and discarded. Dahlia kept walking. Through the great hall, past the kitchens where other servants pointedly looked away. They'd known this was coming, hadn't they? They'd seen her foolish hope, and probably pitied her for it, through the small door that led to the healing gardens. Her feet moved of their own accord, carrying her across the courtyard, through the gate in the outer wall that should have been guarded but wasn't. Who would bother stopping an Omega fleeing in disgrace? And toward the forest that bordered Iron Peak territory. The trees beckoned with dark shadows and rustling leaves. Dahlia ran toward them, her champagne-soaked dress clinging to her legs, her breath coming in ragged gasps that were half sobs. Branches caught at her ruined hair and scratched her arms, but she didn't slow, couldn't slow. Behind her, in the distance, she could still hear the celebration continuing. Music and laughter floating on the night air, indifferent to her pain. She ran until she reached the old healer's path, the one her mother had shown her years ago. Always know where the sacred places are, her mother had whispered. When the world becomes too cruel, nature offers sanctuary. Dahlia collapsed against an ancient oak, finally allowing the tears to come in full force. Great heaving sobs that tore from her chest and echoed through the trees. Her wolf howled inside her mind, a sound of pure anguish that no one else would hear. Because what did it matter if a low-ranking Omega's heart was breaking? Who would care? How had she been so foolish? Derek had never hidden what he was. Charming, ambitious, entitled. She had simply chosen not to see it, too desperate for affection to recognize manipulation when it wore a beautiful face and spoke in sweet words. Her mother, Elena, would have been so disappointed. The thought of her mother brought fresh pain. Elena had died 3 years ago, leaving Dahlia truly alone in the world. She had been the only person who ever made Dahlia feel valued, who taught her that healing was as noble as fighting, that gentleness was strength rather than weakness. "You have special gifts, little moonflower," Elena used to say, her weathered hand cupping Dahlia's cheek. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. There is a purpose to your existence, even if you cannot see it yet. Your grandmother knew things, passed them to me, and now I pass them to you. Guard this knowledge. One day, you'll understand why." Dahlia had thought she meant that everyone had purpose, that it was just something mothers said to comfort their children. Now, soaked in champagne and humiliation, beside an ancient oak, she wondered if Elena had been trying to tell her something more specific, something important. But Elena had died before explaining, taking her secrets to the grave, and Dahlia had been left to navigate the world alone. She wiped champagne and tears from her face, with shaking hands. Her reflection wavered in a puddle of recent rain. Golden hair plastered to her skull, green eyes red-rimmed and swollen, delicate features twisted with grief. Unremarkable, forgettable, worthless. "No," she whispered to her reflection, to the forest, to the indifferent moon hanging thin and pale above. "I am not worthless." Her wolf stirred in agreement, weak but loyal. The creature might be small by pack standards, unable to fully manifest in ways that impressed others, but it possessed a fierce dedication to their survival. Dahlia took a shuddering breath and made a decision. She would leave Iron Peak territory tonight. There was nothing for her here except more pain. She could travel to one of the southern cities where shifters and humans lived in closer proximity, where Omega rights were slightly better protected. Perhaps she could find work as a healer, using the knowledge Elena had passed down. Perhaps she could build something new, where no one knew her as the pathetic Omega who fell for cruel Derek's lies. She stood on unsteady legs, ready to begin the long walk toward a different life. That was when the scent hit her. Blood, fresh and copper bright, mixed with something metallic that made her nose wrinkle and her healing instincts flare to attention. Silver. Someone was bleeding from silver wounds. But beneath those alarming scents lay something else entirely. Something ancient and powerful that resonated in her bones like the deep toll of a bell. Something that made her wolf, quiet and subdued just moments before, suddenly surge forward with startling, unprecedented intensity. The reaction was primal and immediate, as if her wolf recognized something it had been waiting for without knowing. Dahlia turned toward the source of the smell, deeper into the forest, away from Iron Peak territory and toward the unclaimed lands beyond where dangerous things dwelled. Every rational thought screamed at her to run the opposite direction. Nothing good came from following blood trails into dark woods, especially when silver was involved. Silver meant assassination, meant shifter hunters, meant violence beyond what her sheltered life had prepared her for. But her wolf would not be denied. It pulled her forward with an insistence that bordered on frenzy, as if her very survival depended on finding the source of that blood. As if destiny itself waited in the darkness ahead. Dahlia took one step forward, then another. The scent grew stronger, blood and silver, and that indefinable power that called to something deep within her. She followed the healer's path deeper into the forest, leaving behind the lights of Iron Peak Castle, the sound of cruel laughter, the ruins of her foolish dreams. Somewhere ahead, in the shadows between ancient trees, something waited. Something, or someone, that her wolf recognized on an instinctual level that transcended logic or caution. Dahlia walked into the darkness, leaving her old life behind with each step. She did not know yet that she would never return to it as the same person. She did not know that the wounded stranger bleeding into the forest floor was Angelo Gutierrez, the Alpha King himself. She did not know that saving his life would change everything, her understanding of herself, her place in the world, the future of the entire kingdom. All she knew was the pull of her wolf, the scent of blood on the wind, and the strange, certain knowledge that her real story was only just beginning. The blood trail led to a clearing where moonlight barely penetrated the canopy. Dahlia's breath caught when she saw him, a massive figure slumped against an ancient oak, dark armor gleaming wetly in the dim light. Even collapsed and bleeding, Angelo Gutierrez radiated power that made her wolf whimper and press forward simultaneously. Silver blades protruded from his side and shoulder. The wounds wept black blood, poisoned by the cursed metal. His crowned head hung forward, dark hair matted with sweat and gore. The royal insignia on his breastplate, a wolf beneath crossed swords, left no doubt who he was. Derek's brother, the Alpha King, who had watched her humiliation without a word. Dahlia's feet faltered. Every rational instinct screamed to leave him, to let fate take its course. He had done nothing for her. Why should she risk herself for him? But her mother's voice echoed in memory. A healer's oath transcends politics and pain. We answer suffering because we must, not because we should. Dahlia dropped to her knees beside him, fingers already reaching for the leather pouch at her waist. His head lifted slightly, revealing eyes like molten silver. Wolf eyes, not quite human, even in this form. "Stay back," he rasped, his voice carrying command even in weakness. "Not safe." "You're dying," Dahlia replied, pulling out bundles of dried herbs. That makes safety irrelevant. She worked quickly, assessing the damage with hands that had stopped trembling the moment healing became necessary. 3 silver blades, all positioned to kill slowly rather than quickly. Whoever had done this wanted him to suffer. When she gripped the first blade to remove it, Angelo's hand shot out and caught her wrist. The contact sent electricity crackling between them, a shock so intense Dahlia gasped. Inside her mind, her wolf surged forward with unprecedented force, trying to reach through her skin toward him. Angelo's silver eyes widened fractionally. He felt it too. "What are you?" he whispered. "Someone trying to save your life. Let go." He released her, and she pulled the blade free. Angelo's jaw clenched, but he made no sound as she packed the wound with crushed yarrow and whispered words her mother had taught her, old words in a language most shifters had forgotten. The bleeding slowed impossibly fast. "Blood magic," Angelo said, watching her with sharp intelligence despite his pain. "Forbidden since the purge." "Then look away," Dahlia muttered, moving to the second blade. By the time she removed the third, he had lost consciousness. She half dragged, half carried him through the forest to the abandoned healer's cottage her mother had once used. It took all her strength to get him inside and onto the narrow cot that still smelled faintly of medicinal herbs. For 4 days, Dahlia fought for his life. The silver poisoning spread through his system like dark veins beneath his skin. Fever ravaged him, bringing delirium and fever dreams where he spoke in languages she didn't understand and called out names she didn't recognize. But sometimes, more often as the days passed, he murmured hers. Dahlia, he would whisper in his sleep, as if testing the shape of it. Moonflower. She bathed his forehead with cool water, forced healing tinctures between his lips, and changed his bandages with hands that grew steadier with each passing hour. In those intimate moments, she saw him not as the cold Alpha King, but as a man, scarred and ancient and profoundly lonely, in ways she recognized because she carried her own version of that loneliness. On the fourth morning, his fever finally broke. That afternoon, the forest exploded with activity. Royal guards crashed through the undergrowth, led by a stern-faced man with captain's insignia. His hand went to his sword when he saw Dahlia kneeling beside the Alpha King. "Step away from him," Captain Marcos commanded. "He's healing," Dahlia said calmly, though her heart raced. "Don't undo my work." Angelo's eyes opened then, clear and focused for the first time in days. He looked at Dahlia, then at his captain. "Stand down, Marcos. She saved my life." "My king, we've been searching." "I know." Angelo sat up slowly, testing his wounds. They held, pink and healing instead of black and festering. He turned those silver eyes on Dahlia with an intensity that made her want to look away. "Your name?" "Dahlia Houston, Your Majesty." "Dahlia Houston," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. Then, loud enough for all his guards to hear, "I hereby issue formal royal summons. You will attend my court for the mate selection trials." The words struck like lightning. Dahlia shook her head immediately. "No, I'm nobody. This is completely inappropriate. You saved my life when you could have left me to die." Angelo stood, towering over her, even weakened. "When my own brother's betrayal left me vulnerable to ambush, when every reason said you owed me nothing." His voice dropped lower, meant only for her. "You saved my life, Dahlia Houston. That makes you somebody." Before she could protest further, Captain Marcos stepped forwards with a cloak bearing the royal insignia. The summons was issued. Refusal meant treason. Dahlia looked up at Angelo and saw something in those ancient eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or possibility. The electric current still hummed between them, quieter now, but undeniable. She had walked into the forest to escape one impossible situation. She was about to walk into another. But this time, she realized with strange certainty, she would not be walking alone. The 7-day journey to Shadowmere Palace passed in a blur of luxury that felt all wrong. The royal wagon was lined with velvet cushions. Meals appeared at regular intervals, and servants treated Dahlia with careful deference that made her skin crawl. She was nobody pretending to be somebody, and everyone knew it. On the 5th evening, Angelo summoned her to his traveling chambers. He sat by the window, still healing but stronger, watching her with those unnerving silver eyes. "Tell me about your mother," he said without preamble. Dahlia's throat tightened. She was a healer. She died 3 years ago. "What was her name before she married?" "I don't know. She never spoke of her family." Angelo leaned forward. "The blood magic you used, where did she learn it?" "From her mother, I suppose." "Why does it matter?" "Because I think your mother was Lunar Guard." The words fell like stones. Ancient alpha healers, exterminated during the Great Purge because their power threatened warrior alphas who wanted absolute control. A few survived by hiding, by marrying into common families and suppressing what they were. His gaze intensified. Your mother hid to survive. You've been hiding your whole life. Dahlia opened her mouth to protest, but the words died. Her mother's cryptic warnings, the forbidden knowledge, the way Elena had always insisted Dahlia was special, meant for something more. I'm an Omega, she whispered. Are you? Angelo asked. Or have you simply convinced yourself of that because it was safer? Shadowmere Palace rose from the cliffs like a dark crown, all black stone and soaring towers that seemed to pierce the storm clouds gathering above. Dahlia's breath caught despite herself. It was imposing and beautiful and utterly terrifying. The great hall buzzed with candidates when she entered, 40 noble women in silk and jewels, each more stunning than the last. And there, near the front, stood Derek and Vivian. Their shock when they saw Dahlia was almost worth the humiliation she'd endured. What is she doing here? Vivian's voice carried across the hall. Angelo appeared on the dais, crowned and commanding. The mate selection trials begin tomorrow, but understand this. I will not choose based on beauty or breeding alone. These trials will test wisdom, courage, and true wolf strength. His eyes found Dahlia in the crowd. Character matters more than birthright. The first trial came swiftly. A child lay dying of a magical illness, her symptoms baffling the healers. Noble candidates examined her with delicate fingers and confused expressions, offering useless suggestions. When Dahlia's turn came, she recognized the curse immediately. Moonsbane poisoning. Rare, but treatable. Silverleaf extract, she said quietly, mixed with blessed water and thistle root. The proportions must be exact. The head healer's eyes widened. You're certain? I am. Within an hour, the child's fever broke. The crowd murmured. Dahlia's score, 24 of 25. The highest yet. The second trial came under a waning moon. Wolf transformation, when their power would be weakest, when only true strength could manifest. Noble candidates shifted into sleek, beautiful wolves of brown and gray and black. When Dahlia's turn came, she closed her eyes and reached inward. Her wolf surged forward, no longer small and cowering, but magnificent. Silver gold fur blazed in the moonlight, ethereal and powerful. She was larger than any Omega should be, her eyes glowing with ancient light that made the crowd gasp and step back. Lunar Guard coloring, someone whispered. Dahlia looked across the courtyard and found Derek's face pale with fear. Vivian's twisted with jealous rage. She was no longer their victim. She was something they had never imagined she could be. Something they should have feared all along. The accidents began the next morning. A venomous snake coiled in Dahlia's bed. Dead, thankfully, its fangs removed, but the message was clear. Spoiled food arrived at her chambers, reeking of rot beneath silver covers. Her gown for the evening ceremony appeared shredded, delicate silk torn beyond repair. Vivian's work, obviously, supported by whispers and cold stares from nobles who saw Dahlia as an upstart threatening the natural order. During the garden party on the third day, Vivian struck more directly. She stumbled near the ornamental fountain, her hand connecting solidly with Dahlia's back. The cold water closed over Dahlia's head, soaking through her carefully arranged hair and borrowed dress. The crowd waited for tears, for rage, for the humiliation to break her again. Instead, Dahlia pulled herself out with careful dignity, water streaming from her gown. She met Vivian's triumphant gaze steadily, then walked away without a word, spine straight and head high. Behind her, she heard the whispers shift. She has spirit, at least. Or she's too delusional to know when she's beaten. That evening, Angelo found her in the royal gardens where moonflowers bloomed, the same flowers Derek had once claimed to love. She touched their petals gently, marveling that something so fragile survived in palace grounds. "Why me?" she asked without turning. She'd felt his presence the moment he entered. "You could have any noble-born alpha in the realm. I need a queen who understands suffering, but hasn't become cruel," Angelo said, moving to stand beside her. "Someone who heals instead of destroys. Someone who knows what it means to be powerless and refuses to use power the same way it was used against her." Dahlia looked up at him, at the scars visible even in moonlight, at eyes that had seen too many centuries of cruelty disguised as tradition. "I'm giving you a choice," he continued, "not a summons you can't refuse. Accept this position, knowing it will be harder than anything you've faced, or leave with enough resources to start a new life anywhere in the realm. Either way, you're free." The offer stunned her. Freedom, resources, a chance to disappear and never face mockery again. But as she stood there among the moonflowers, Dahlia realized something had shifted inside her. She didn't want to hide anymore. Didn't want to make herself small and invisible. Didn't want to let people like Vivian and Derek win by making her run. "I'll stay," she whispered. Angelo smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his scarred face. "Good." The assassination attempt came at the formal dinner 2 nights later. Dahlia lifted the wine goblet to her lips and froze. Beneath the rich burgundy scent lay something else. Bitter and wrong, nightshade, deadly in concentration. She set down the goblet carefully. "This wine is poisoned." The hall erupted. Guards seized servants. Angelo's fury was cold and precise, demanding answers. The investigation moved swiftly. Lord Ashford had orchestrated it, accepting payment from an unnamed benefactor. When Ashford's chambers were searched, they found correspondence in Derek's hand, circumstantial but damning. Ashford was executed at dawn. Derek claimed ignorance, but his face told a different story. That afternoon, Angelo met Dahlia in the training yard. "I'll teach you to fight," he said, handing her a practice blade. "Healers who can also fight are the most dangerous opponents." The training was brutal. Dahlia's muscles screamed, sweat soaked through her clothes. But with each lesson, she grew stronger, not just physically, but in the certainty of who she was becoming. During breaks, when Angelo corrected her stance or demonstrated a parry, his hands would linger a moment longer than necessary. The electric current that had sparked between them in the forest hummed stronger now, fed by proximity and growing trust. "You're learning quickly," he said one evening, both of them breathing hard from sparring. "I have good motivation," Dahlia replied, meeting his silver eyes. "People keep trying to kill me." Angelo laughed, another rare gift, and Dahlia realized she was no longer just surviving. She was claiming the life she deserved, one hard-won lesson at a time. The weeks passed in a rhythm of steel and strategy. Dahlia trained with Angelo's elite guard each dawn, her body learning what her wolf already knew: how to strike, how to defend, how to become dangerous. But she wielded softer power too. She established a healer's council, giving voice to those who mended rather than broke. Safe houses appeared in the lower city, where abused omegas could find sanctuary under royal protection. Small changes, quiet revolution. While Dahlia built, Derek plotted. In shadowed taverns and forgotten chambers, He met with mercenaries whose loyalty came measured in gold. Blood mages willing to work forbidden magic for the right price. Nobles who whispered that the old ways, brutal and hierarchical, should never change. The Blood Moon Hunt was announced as tradition demanded, a final trial where candidates would prove their hunting prowess in the enchanted forest. 40 women prepared for the chase, unaware that some hunted more than game. The horn sounded at dusk. Dahlia moved through the forest with newfound confidence, tracking a silver stag whose prints glowed faintly in the crimson moonlight. Around her, other candidates spread through the trees, their excited voices fading into distance. Then the screaming started. Dahlia ran toward the sound and found chaos. Silver nets fell from the canopy, ensnaring Angelo's guards. Blood magic pulsed through the air, separating the Alpha King from his protection. Mercenaries emerged from the undergrowth, their weapons gleaming with cursed silver. Angelo fought magnificently, but the cursed chains found him, wrapping around his limbs, burning through armor, binding him to the forest floor with magic that made his wolf whimper and retreat. Derek stepped into the clearing, sword drawn, face twisted with hatred barely controlled. "Hello, brother," he said pleasantly. "What a tragic hunting accident this will be. The Alpha King, separated from his guards, fallen prey to rogue mercenaries." He knelt beside Angelo with mock concern. "And all because you were distracted by an Omega playing at being queen." "Derek." Angelo's voice was strained, fighting the chain's magic. "This is treason. This is necessity." Derek stood, turning toward where Dahlia crouched in the shadows. "The nobles who fund me want the old system preserved. Omegas in their place. Alphas ruling through strength, not sentiment." His smile was cruel. "Come out, Dahlia. Let's end this properly." Dahlia stepped into the clearing, hands raised. "Derek, please. You always were too soft to matter," he interrupted, raising his sword. "Too gentle, too weak. You should have stayed in the gardens where you belonged." Something inside Dahlia shattered. Not her spirit, but the last chain of doubt that said she wasn't enough, couldn't be enough, would never be enough. "I'm done being underestimated," she said quietly. The shift came like lightning. Her wolf surged forward with devastating power, no longer suppressed or apologetic. Silver gold fur blazed with inner radiance, each strand glowing like captured starlight. She was massive, larger than Derek, larger than any Omega should be. Ancient Lunar Guard power awakened fully, combining healer magic with alpha strength in ways the world had forgotten. She moved faster than Derek could track. Her jaws closed around his sword arm, crushing bone and steel together. He screamed, collapsing as his weapon fell useless. The mercenaries attacked. Dahlia destroyed them, not just with teeth and claws, but with magic that pulsed from her very being. Healing turned to harm. Life force redirected to stunning and breaking. Blood mages tried their curses and found them reflected, amplified, turned back with interest. When the clearing fell silent except for groaning wounded, Dahlia approached Angelo. She placed her paws on the cursed chains and felt her mother's knowledge flowing through her. Ancient words, forgotten techniques, healer magic that could mend or unmake. The chains shattered like glass. Angelo stood, healed and awed, staring at the magnificent creature before him. Dahlia shifted back to human form, breathing hard, covered in blood not her own. "You saved me," Angelo said softly. "Again." Derek's trial was swift. The conspiracy unraveled under questioning. Nobleman names, payment records, plans to restore the brutal hierarchy. He was sentenced to exile, branded as traitor. The mark burned into his flesh while he screamed. As guards dragged him toward the border, Derek looked back at his brother. "This isn't over. She'll destroy you." Angelo pulled Dahlia close, his hand gentle on her face. "She saved me," he said, his voice carrying to all assembled. "You're not just my choice, Dahlia. You're my equal." And for the first time, Dahlia believed it. 3 weeks later, the trial of witness convened in the Great Hall. Ancient tradition allowed nobles to formally object before a bonding ceremony. They came with their grievances, their fears disguised as concerns. "She hid her bloodline," Lord Pemberton argued. "How can we trust deception?" Dahlia stood before them, no longer the trembling Omega who'd fled champagne-soaked from Iron Peak. "I didn't hide my bloodline. I didn't know it existed, but I know who I am now. A healer, a fighter, someone who will stand for those who've been silenced." "She lacks proper training," Lady Ashworth protested. "Then watch me learn," Dahlia replied steadily. "I've survived assassination attempts and transformed ancient power. I'll master statecraft the same way." One by one, the objections fell away beneath the weight of what she'd already proven. The ancient priestess arrived on the day of the full moon, a woman so old her eyes had gone milky white, yet she moved with certainty through the sacred grove where the ceremony would take place. She took Dahlia's hands in hers, studying her with senses beyond sight. "The soul binding will merge you completely," the priestess warned. "Every secret, every fear, every hidden shame will be visible to each other. Can you bear being truly known?" Dahlia thought of Angelo seeing her deepest wounds, the years of humiliation, the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, believing she was worthless. Then she thought of seeing his, centuries of loneliness, the weight of choices that had cost lives, the desperate hope that she could help him become the king his people needed, instead of just feared. "Yes," she whispered, "I can bear it." That night, beneath a moon so full it seemed to pulse with light, they stood in the sacred grove. Silver starlight filtered through ancient trees, illuminating the circle marked with salt and crushed moonflowers. Nobles and commoners alike gathered to witness what many still believed impossible. The priestess spoke in the old tongue, words that made the air shimmer. She made small cuts on their palms with a ceremonial blade. When Dahlia and Angelo pressed their bleeding hands together, the connection exploded between them. Not just physical sensation, but complete merging. Dahlia felt Angelo's soul flooding into hers. His loneliness, sharp as broken glass. His fierce protectiveness. His awe at her strength. His hope, fragile as new spring growth. And she knew he felt her too. Every moment of suffering she'd endured. Her unshakable compassion. Her determination never to use power the way it had been used against her. Her growing love for this scarred king who'd chosen her when choosing someone else would have been easier. The priestess continued chanting. Silver light descended from the stars themselves, wrapping around their joined hands, sealing what had been spoken. "By blood and moon, by word and will," the priestess intoned. "This bond is sealed. Let no force break what is here made whole." The light flared brilliant and blinding. When it faded, something fundamental had shifted. Dahlia felt Angelo's presence like a constant warm weight against her consciousness. Through the bond, his voice came clear. "My queen, my equal, my heart, my king," she answered. "My protector, my choice." 10 months later, Dahlia stood on the palace balcony, 7 months pregnant with twins, watching the sun rise over a transformed kingdom. The Lunar Academy trained healers in the lower city, The Omega Protection Act had passed, giving voice and rights to those once powerless. Former enemy Alpha Mateo had arrived yesterday, returning her mother's journals with genuine apology. Inside the royal nursery, preparations continued for Luna and Solara, daughters who would inherit both kingdoms and the revolution their mother had begun. In distant exile, Derek gathered allies who whispered the old ways should return. But Dahlia felt no fear. She'd survived being broken. She'd claimed power everyone said she couldn't possess. She'd transformed a kingdom one careful choice at a time. Angelo's arms wrapped around her from behind, his hand settling over her swollen belly. Through their bond, she felt his contentment, his pride, his love fierce and unshakable. "Let them come," Dahlia said softly, watching the sunrise paint the world gold. "I survived being broken. I won't break again. We'll face it together," Angelo murmured against her hair. "Always." And in that moment, with starlight still glowing faintly in her silver gold hair and her daughters moving beneath her heart, Dahlia Houston, once nobody, now queen, believed in the impossible made real.